Hi, I'm Schill, writer, illustrator, and editor, and this is Friday, so we're going to talk and we're going to have some tea. This is my tea. Today, we have Earl Grey. I don't know if you can see that, but I've got little specks of tea leaves floating in my Earl Grey because my tea bag literally ripped open while I was making my tea, but we don't waste tea here, so we're just going to suck it down anyways. So today I want to talk about beta readers. If you don't know what a beta reader is, it is a special reader that an author will use after they're done with their final draft or near end to their final draft to read over their manuscript and give them some reader feedback and input in how they're doing. Oh, that's a lot of tea leaf. But anyways, most writers I know use beta readers. There can be a very useful tool. I know a few writers who don't use beta readers, and they tend to be of a certain generation. They were coming up in the 70s and 80s. That was a generation when you finished your draft and you did it on deadline and you sent it to your editor, and it really just went from deadline, draft, finish to editor. And that was really the order things happened. Today, more often, people have this added step of getting beta reader feedback. I'm not saying one way is right or the other, but having a beta reader can definitely be to your benefit if you know how to use them appropriately. I want to talk about how I use a beta reader specifically. A lot of people, when they ask for beta readers, they tend to get their manuscript and just hand it to someone and say, give me feedback. I don't tend to give things to a beta reader without direction. Otherwise, you have less control over the type and quality of feedback you are getting. I like to pose specific questions to a beta reader and have them answer them. My questions I pose are aimed at getting descriptive feedback opposed to prescriptive feedback. Let me go into that a little bit, the difference between prescriptive versus descriptive. A prescriptive feedback, like it says, like getting a prescription from the doctor, is something that you get to help you and it'll fix you. So what can happen is the reader sees that there's something in the book, manuscript, short story, whatever, that they don't like, and they prescribe you an answer to it. They tell you how to fix it. They give you advice on what you can do to basically book doctor yourself. I come from a world where that type of advice, prescriptive advice, is seen as editorial advice. I'm not really looking for editorial advice when I'm looking at a beta reader. I, in the past, have been giving very editorial beta reads. I have given very prescriptive advice, and those are under very specific circumstances. If you're dealing with someone who's a lot younger than you, I've helped teenagers before, done teenage writing workshops before, and a lot of times what they're looking for is prescriptive advice. What am I doing? How can I improve it? And what are the tools I need to improve it? However, in the past, I've given prescriptive advice to authors when they've asked me to beta read. They asked for a beta read. I've given prescriptive advice because they were asking for it. And I've come to the realization that what I was basically doing was offering editorial services for free. I mean, I'm banking 40 to 100 hours into a beta read for someone, and it's coming out the other end. I'm basically being a content editor with inline comments about everything. And that's what they asked for, but I've come to the point in my life where I'm not really willing to give that type of help for free, but I am willing to beta read for free, and that's when I get into the idea of descriptive advice. Descriptive advice does not come with a prescription. It does not come with any thoughts on how you should fix it, how to fix it, or direction to fix it. Descriptive advice simply tells the writer how the reader felt about something, how they responded and interacted with the manuscript or the piece of writing directly. Now, getting back to what I was saying about how I use beta readers, I try to direct beta readers to give very descriptive advice by posing questions. And when I hand a manuscript over to someone and ask for a beta read, it comes with a list of very specific questions about what I am looking for. The first question I ask is usually, where was it boring? What parts of the story bored you? You found dull, it was hard to get through, it was a trudge, any way you want to interpret that. Because that question gives me some very specific and very helpful insight into reader experience, and why I don't need people to help me with prescriptive advice about when they find something boring is because the minute someone tells me something's boring, I already pretty much know what's going on. I'm probably delaying, nothing has happened for a while in the story, it's too exposition heavy. I have all the tools in my toolbox already on diagnosing and identifying and fixing if something is boring. The second thing I ask for is, was it believable? Or where in the story did you have to suspend disbelief? And it was hard to suspend disbelief. It was just fathomable that a character would do something that's stupid to you, or the character chose to do something that was in complete conflict to their character that as you knew them up to that point. Or maybe it had to do with me not researching enough and I put something in the story that just brought you out of the story. Again, I don't need prescriptive advice. Simply by the reader telling me what it made them feel, where it brought them out of the story, what they found unbelievable, I can diagnose and prescribe myself a fix for that. And the third question I tend to ask is, where in the story were you confused? This is usually a big one. It has to do with consistency, narrative flow, order of operation of events. This one can tell you a lot. It can tell you if you forgot to put something in that you thought you did, but you didn't, and now the reader is like, why is this happening in this order? It can tell you where you didn't properly build your character out. If the character starts doing something and they're confused, like, well, why would they do that? I don't understand why they're doing this thing when they were over here and now they're over here. It's probably because you messed your arc up and now it's super confusing about the motivation, and that probably ties back into a believability as well, when motivation is unbelievable. A lot of these become bedfellows, and the more they cross-section in the Venn diagram, the easier it is for you to diagnose a solution and see exactly where it was that you went wrong. Overall, the big reason why I prefer these questions and to line these questions up to direct a descriptive feedback instead of prescriptive one is I frankly don't want advice on how I should fix something. And this isn't because I am so great and I know everything. It's more to do with the reader themselves doesn't automatically know where you're going with something. They might not know the full arc that you're trying to achieve. They might not know your goals. And a lot of times people can impress their own goals and their own agendas onto something, and it taints it. So I'm trying to remove as much of that as possible. Also, it's not the beta reader's job to write your story for you. When you're asking prescriptive advice, you're asking for how they would write the story. And that's not fair, and that's almost not appropriate to me. You have to write the story how you write the story, not how your beta readers would write the story. It's actually a bit rude to have them write it for you. You're the writer, this is your job, not theirs. So I try to remove as much of that as possible. I think it leaves a healthier beta reader writer relationship and dynamic in general. It's also this one thing can happen sometimes when you give a manuscript to a beta reader with no direction whatsoever. People like to be liked, and these probably are your friends or your colleagues or family members, people who generally love you. Without a directive toward descriptive feedback, they might be feel tempted to flattery. Say, "Oh, this is great." The answer of, "Oh, this is great," is not helpful. It's almost never helpful. The only caveat to that I would give is if someone was to put an inline comment about something and say, "Wow, this is so amazing. If you change this, I will come and stab you in your sleep." That's helpful, sorta, because, I mean, it's okay if, like, it's so awesome that it has to stay and they have to point out how awesome it is and how you should never get rid of this one facet or piece of your story. That can be helpful, but usually that's not the positive feedback you get with a beta read. Usually the positive feedback you get is kind of blasé, mush-mouthed, milquetoast answers or responses of, "Oh, this is just so wonderful, darling." It's not helpful. Frankly, when I give something away to a beta read, I'm not looking for validation. You have to ask yourself what you're in this for. Are you in it for validation? Or are you in it to progress, get better, sell some damn stories? What are you here for? If you're in it for validation, yeah, send it off to people you know who are just going to tell you how awesome you are. If you're in it to build yourself and get better, I highly suggest building in a structure of exact things you are looking for from your beta reader. It doesn't have to be what I do. I like these 3 questions because I like as little prescriptive interjection as possible. I just like to understand the reader experience, not how the reader would write the story if it was them. Tell me what you hate, and I'll look into my toolbox and see what I pull out to try to remedy what you hate. Part of that solution might be oh, they don't know what they're talking about because they don't understand where I'm going with this. It's okay. It's totally okay if you decide in the end my beta reader was wrong about this. I've beta read for plenty of people and they take 99% of my advice, but there's just one sticking point. They're like, "Nope, never changing that." And sometimes they feel like they have to justify to me why they're never changing it, and you don't. I mean, I'm not you. I don't know where you're going with this. I don't know what your sequel looks like. I don't know what plans you have for these characters past whatever this segment or this book or story that you gave me is. It needs no justification. My ego isn't hurt here. If I choose the beta read for you, I am strictly doing it in service to you. Yeah, you can decide that you just don't agree with your beta reader. And that's okay. And the less, I believe, prescriptive openings that you give to them, the less conflict with that disagreement you'll find. But yeah, that's overall how I feel about it. If you have any thoughts of your own, comments, leave them below. Have a dialogue about this. Maybe you handle beta reader differently. Maybe you love prescriptive advice. Maybe you're all about prescriptive advice. Argue it. Have at it. And overall, that's pretty much all I got on this today. It's been a tea talk. Has some Earl Grey filled with leaves still. I'm drinking it because I don't waste tea. Well, I will see you next week every Friday to have some tea, talk about random items as part of the creative process. And until then, thanks for joining me. It has so many loose leaves in it.